At 65, Sean Penn is no longer protecting the version of himself the public expects. For decades, he kept his judgments private, while audiences assumed his intensity lived only on screen. Behind the scenes, however, certain encounters stayed with him, patterns repeated, lines were crossed, resentment settled quietly and never fully left. This countdown reveals the 6 people whose actions Penn could not forget even after the work ended. Each name reflects a moment where principle collided with ego, trust, or control. These are not rumors or grudges, they are conclusions formed over years. And the final entry challenges what many fans believe about Penn's closest relationships in Hollywood. Number 6. Nicolas Cage, chasing empty fame. When Sean Penn spoke about Nicolas Cage, he did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His judgment came from a line he had protected for decades, a boundary he believed serious actors should never cross. In an interview, he said it plainly. Nick Cage is no longer an actor. He's more like a performer. It was not framed as provocation. It landed as a conclusion. To Penn, it marked a moment where a respected peer had chosen a different priority. That judgment carried weight because it came from proximity, not distance. Penn and Cage moved through the same early circles. They shared friends, influences, and the pressure of being young actors expected to prove something real. Penn had seen Cage when restraint mattered, when risk served truth instead of scale. His comment was shaped by memory. He was not reacting to success. He was reacting to what he felt had been left behind. Penn's distinction between actor and performer was precise. An actor, in his view, protects the work. He selects roles that threaten failure. He accepts silence, stillness, and discomfort if the result is honest. A performer chases momentum. He chooses volume. He follows the current of what sells. Penn pointed to Cage's run of large studio films, including Con Air and Face Off, as proof that spectacle had overtaken discipline. In one interview, he described the surrounding industry in blunt terms, signaling how seriously he believed the craft was eroding. The divide became visible not in private, but in public conversation. When Penn's comment reached Cage, there was no retaliation. Cage responded calmly. He said Penn was entitled to his opinion and that he had no interest in a feud. He reframed the label instead of rejecting it. If being an actor meant hiding behind technique, Cage said, then he preferred being a performer. He described his work as emotionally direct and openly expressive. It was not reconciliation. It was separation. That exchange settled the matter. There was no confrontation, no repair, and no collaboration that followed. Penn did not soften his stance. Cage did not adjust his path. What stood between them was not personal bitterness, but incompatible beliefs about what the job required. Penn saw drift where Cage saw freedom. Cage saw range where Penn saw surrender. Cage continued forward without apology. Penn continued without him. And as Penn turned to the next name on the list, the conflict moved from artistic principle to something far less abstract, where intensity was no longer philosophical but imposed. Number 5. Michael J. Fox, Silent Divide Endured. On Casualties of War, the tension between Sean Penn and Michael J. Fox did not surface through shouting or confrontation. It settled in quietly, through boundaries that hardened over time. Stephen Baldwin later described one of those moments publicly. Penn addressed the cast and made his expectation clear. There would be no warmth toward Fox, no casual conversation. Our characters hate him, so you have to hate him with me. Do what I tell you. It was not framed as collaboration. It was instruction. Fox did not challenge the demand directly. Instead, he remained apart. His response was distance rather than resistance. According to those present, he stayed professional, focused on his work, and avoided the emotional immersion Penn was enforcing beyond the camera. That separation became visible on set. They were not speaking. They were not connecting between takes. The absence itself became a presence. Baldwin disrupted that atmosphere unintentionally. He offered Fox a compliment, a small gesture meant to cut through the strain. In another production, it would have passed unnoticed. On this set, it did not. Baldwin later said that after questioning Penn's delivery during rehearsal, he was removed from the film. Director Brian De Palma, according to Baldwin's account, acted quickly and decisively. The message that followed was unmistakable. Penn's method was not open for debate. From Fox's perspective, the conflict never escalated into personal insult or open hostility. It remained cold. Observers at the time noted the contrast between their approaches. Fox worked with restraint and sensitivity. Penn pushed for severity and immersion. Those methods did not blend. They created parallel performances shaped by different instincts, sharing the same frame but not the same space. The result was a set defined by silence. Fox did not bend toward Penn's intensity, and Penn did not soften his expectations. The divide was never repaired. When filming ended, the distance remained, unspoken but intact. That quiet fracture held until someone else tested Penn's authority more directly and learned how quickly resistance could carry a price. If you want to follow more videos like this, you can subscribe here. Number 4. Stephen Baldwin disciplines early defiance. When the casualties of war set came to life, the air carried a strain that only grew sharper with time. One actor walked in with the firmness of someone who treated every scene like a field exercise. The other walked in still learning how to stand his ground. That was the distance between Sean Penn and Stephen Baldwin long. Before the cameras found their rhythm, Baldwin has shared his side openly. He arrived, settled in for the early days, and then stepped into a rehearsal that changed his path. He heard Penn's delivery, questioned it, and felt the room shift against him. Not long after, he was told his bags were packed and a seat on a flight was waiting. The message was delivered without ceremony. He also remembers the off-camera rule Penn tried to build. Penn wanted the platoon to treat Michael J. Fox's character with cold distance even when the camera wasn't rolling. "We hate him," Penn told them, "so you have to hate him with me." Baldwin didn't follow that lead. He respected Fox, spoke to him, even complimented him, and in doing so, stepped outside the atmosphere Penn was trying to hold together. Later, when Baldwin questioned Penn's muffled lines during rehearsal, the tension surfaced. That moment, Baldwin says, set off director Brian De Palma, and the dismissal followed. On a set like that, one moment of resistance can shift the entire room. For Baldwin, it ended his place in a film that could have shaped the early part of his career. From on-set clashes to sudden dismissals, Penn's intensity shaped every project he touched. But the next story isn't about a film set, it's about a meeting that shook international headlines. Number 3, Kate Del Castillo, trust betrayed, spotlighted danger. When Kate Del Castillo contacted Joaquin El Chapo Guzman in 2015, she believed she was navigating a narrow and controlled path. The goal, as she described it later, was a film project built on discretion. Silence mattered, exposure did not. She invited Sean Penn into that space because she believed his involvement would bring weight and protection, not attention. That assumption collapsed the moment Penn published the meeting as a Rolling Stone article. For Del Castillo, the damage did not begin with the article itself. It began with the reaction that followed. Authorities traced the encounter, private messages surfaced, prosecutors summoned her for questioning. Her public standing shifted overnight from actress to subject. She has stated repeatedly that Penn never told her he intended to publish the meeting, and that the story reframed her role in ways she did not recognize. What she expected to remain contained became permanent record. As scrutiny intensified, her view of Penn hardened. She accused him of using her as a bridge, then stepping aside once the consequences landed. She said the article placed her family at risk, exhausted her finances, and forced her into legal defense over a narrative she did not authorize. These were not emotional grievances, they were claims of responsibility. In her telling, Penn left with a byline. She remained with the fallout. Penn described the situation differently. He said his intent was journalistic, not exploitative. He later acknowledged that the outcome had spiraled beyond anything he anticipated, turning into a global spectacle that erased any serious discussion he hoped to provoke about the drug trade. But intention did not erase consequence. From Del Castillo's position, the article reordered events and stripped her of control at the moment she needed it most. What followed locked the distance between them. Del Castillo pursued legal action against officials she said had targeted her unfairly. Subsequent documentaries and media projects revisited the meeting without her involvement, reopening questions she had never been able to close. Each retelling reinforced her association with a moment she believed should have remained private. For Penn, the episode marked a collision between access and accountability. For Del Castillo, it marked a breach that could not be repaired. And as Penn's list moved forward, the focus shifted away from public controversy towards something quieter, where the cost was measured not in headlines, but in years. Number 2, Robin Wright, love's fragile compromise. When people talk about Sean Penn and Robin Wright, the story is often simplified into distance or drift. That version misses the weight of what actually happened. Their relationship moved quickly, carried hope early, and collapsed under pressures neither of them could outwork. The marks it left are still visible in how both of them speak about it. They met in 1989, shortly after Penn's marriage to Madonna ended. Wright entered a life already marked by intensity. They married in 1996, raised 2 children, and spent more than a decade moving through the same cycle: separation, reconciliation, another attempt to stabilize stabilize something that never fully settled. When they divorced in 2010, it confirmed what years of strain had already shown. Penn later spoke about the marriage with unusual bluntness. In an Esquire interview, he said he had been unaware of the fraud in a few of these circumstances blindly. It was not framed as accusation toward Wright. It was self-indictment. He described realizing too late that belief had replaced clarity, that honesty stripped the story of romance and left only recognition. On Mark Moran's podcast, Penn reduced their present relationship to a single phrase. He said they don't not get along, they rarely speak, their differences in parenting and temperament never align. Time did not soften those divides, it widened them. Wright echoed that exhaustion. She said their repeated attempts to reunite were driven by a desire to protect their children, not by resolved conflict. She called the divorce devastating and acknowledged that returning again and again only extended the damage. Love was not absent, compatibility was. Today, they remain civil, they co-parent, they appear together when necessary, but the distance remains intact, shaped by years of trying to force a shared life that never found balance. This was not about betrayal or cruelty, it was about limits. And for Penn, it became one of the clearest lessons on what intensity can sustain and what it quietly destroys. Robin Wright represents years of private struggle and quiet tension, but sometimes even seasoned actors can't absorb Penn's intensity without friction. Number 1, Gary Shandling, humor turned brittle. When people talk about Sean Penn's intensity, they usually point to his performances, but during Hurlyburly in 1998, that intensity crossed from the work into the room itself when he encountered Gary Shandling. The set developed a quiet tension, the kind that forms when two actors bring opposing instincts and incompatible ideas about what discipline looks like. Penn arrived with his familiar severity. He wanted the environment controlled, serious, and stripped of anything that diluted focus. Comedy, even between takes, was not welcome. Shandling came from another direction. His reputation was built on introspection and dry, self-aware humor, the kind that questioned itself as it unfolded. On a film centered on fractured relationships and emotional damage, that difference did not stay theoretical. It pressed against the atmosphere of the set. One moment from that period later appeared as a joke on the Larry Sanders Show, though few in the industry heard it as harmless. Penn described Shandling as insecure and an awful actor, then added a remark about Shandling trying to get into his wife's trailer. Framed as comedy, it still landed as a public dismissal. In Hollywood, a line like that does more than mock. It establishes hierarchy. It signals who belongs and who does not. Shandling's working style left him exposed in that environment. His performances often relied on uncertainty and self-examination, traits that fueled his comedy but read differently in a dramatic setting. Penn, grounded in control and precision, appeared to interpret that uncertainty as weakness. Once that judgment formed, the distance between them hardened. After Hurlyburly, there was no repair and no continued collaboration. The divide remained intact, shaped by a single conclusion. For Penn, the work demanded firmness. For Shandling, it allowed doubt. And in that difference, the relationship quietly ended.